I'm going to welcome our first candidate. And again, our candidates were chosen in alphabetical order. Our first candidate, Amoy Barnes. Welcome. Before you get started, we just want to let all the candidates and participants know that our timekeeper is going to be keeping time in the chat. So you'll have a 30-second warning before we mute and before additional questions are going to be asked. Amoy, welcome. You have 4 minutes for your personal introduction and opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I just want to say thank you so much to Transportation Alternatives and to all the sponsors. And thank you to all my fellow candidates and to everybody who's taking the time to listen and to watch on Facebook and every single social media platform out there. My name is Amoy Barnes, and I'm a candidate for New York City Council, Staten Island's 49th District. I'm excited to be running for office because one of the things that I always say is that I've been a proud public servant my entire career. It is an honor and a pleasure to be of service to my community. And I want to make sure to continue that work in City Hall to fight for our community to get the resources and services that we are so deservingly need. I say this all the time, we are not the forgotten borough, we are the underestimated borough. When you think about transportation, when you think about Staten Island, what the first thing I think about is potential, because we have so much potential. We are an island, literally and figuratively, island is in our name. And there are so many underutilized transportation options here on this island. We are not utilizing our waterways and ferry services. We are not utilizing our waterfront. There's so much opportunity here on Staten Island, and that's what I see. But those opportunities fail to come to fruition because we are lacking and we are not getting our fair share in resources and in funding. And when we look at City Council, when we think about City Council, I always break it down into 3 simple things: budgeting, legislation, and land use. And that's what I want to make sure I do. I want to make sure I go to City Hall and fight to make sure that our district is getting a fair share of that budget and of that funding. I want to make sure we're writing legislation that's going to be beneficial for our community. And I want to make sure that when we talk about land use and our public property is being used accordingly to serve the needs of our community and the constituents of the North Shore. So at the end of the day, what's exciting is that there is so much opportunity and so much potential, not just for now, but for the future of our community. And that's what I want to do. I want to build on the work that has been done, but I want to take it to the next level. And I'm so excited to be able to do that, but hopefully I'm going to be able to do that as your future city councilwoman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amoy. We're going to move on now to the first question. And just a reminder, the time is going to be kept in the chat, so keep an eye out. First question is by one of our sponsor partnership organizations, La Colmena. How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges that they face on Staten Island? Immigrant workers spend 70% of their paycheck on housing and transportation, but yet they're often left out of these very important conversations. Amoy?
So thank you so much. So this is something that's very close to my heart. I'm an immigrant myself. My family and I immigrated to Staten Island from Jamaica. Jamaica the island, not Jamaica Queens. People get confused sometimes. And so when I think about transportation, I think about my mother waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day to take the bus to go to her first job at McDonald's and open up and do the morning shift. So when we think about transportation and we think about immigrants, and I say this all the time, this is the backbone of our community. This is the backbone of our economy, and making sure that people can get to work on time and making sure that people can be able to have alternatives and access to transportation, no matter what their immigration status is extremely important. What I always think when it comes to connecting with the immigrant community, I say this all the time, you just have to go and talk to people. The role of an elected official, first and foremost, is to listen. That's what you have to do. You have to listen to people. You have to listen to people, and then you go and you be the voice of that community in City Hall. And so at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm listening to the variety of communities and the diverse communities that we serve here on Staten Island, and making sure that those communities are being served and providing them with alternative forms of transportation accessible forms of transportation, and even pushing and for the mayor to even put somebody on the MTA board. The mayor can appoint 4 people to the MTA board, and not one of those people are from Staten Island. So having that conversation with the future administration and saying, hey, listen, you could appoint somebody on the MTA board that's from Staten Island that can be that direct voice. So really, it's about making sure that we're making these connections across the board, and that elected official, your city council member, is being that bridge and being that voice to connect the needs of the community and improve people's quality of life. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's just about listening to people.
Thank you, Amoy. Our second question, the Harbor Ring. Given the documented surge in bike ridership across Staten Island's North Shore, as well as the rest of New York City, do you believe it's time to expand bike and pedestrian access to the Verrazano Bridge?
Absolutely. If it's possible, if it's doable, why not? I say this over and over and over again. We can look at what has been done in other places, and somehow Staten Island is always left out of the fold. I can't stress this enough. We have to start being more creative with our transportation options. We know how to do certain things. I've seen it done, and we've all seen it done in other places. We've seen it done in Brooklyn. We've seen it done in Queens, and we've seen it done in Manhattan. And City Bike has already expanded into the Bronx. Bike share is Staten Island is still the only borough that still does not have a bike share program. Thank you so much to Transportation Alternatives and to Rose for organizing the wonderful press conference that happened this weekend to bring to light that Staten Island is still the only borough without a bike share program, and Staten Island is the only borough that's unable to connect to the other boroughs without any form of transportation except the Staten Island Ferry. So we should really be looking at those options.
Thank you, Amoy. We're going to move on to question number 3. Staten Island is the most bus-dependent borough in New York City by far. The fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to improve bus service for Staten Islanders is through the expansion of bus-only lanes, which the DOT has the power to install at this very moment. Do you support the expansion of bus lanes? And what are other steps you will take to improve our transit system?
So with the expansion of bus lanes, I'm a big believer is making sure that we're looking at the data, right? So when we're looking at expanding bus lanes, we have to make sure that we're looking at how those expansions affect our community, affect our businesses, affect our schools, affect transportation. So really, I want to make sure always that when we're looking at any type of expansion, that we're making sure that we're doing our due diligence as government and making sure that we're looking at all the different options and how things affect different things. Because at the end of the day, I'm a big supporter of making sure that we have more access to bus lanes. The fact of the matter is that we want to make sure that those buses can get to A to Z as quickly as possible. Staten Islanders have the longest commute in the entire city and one of the longest commutes in the entire country when it comes to getting from here to there, when it comes to getting to work. And this is honestly a disaster. So when we talk about improving infrastructure and improving transportation, we do have to look at how do we get people from A to Z as quickly as possible? How can we get people to work in a timely manner so that folks aren't spending 4, 5, 6 hours commuting on a daily basis? I'm a big believer, like I said, in alternative transportation options. We can look at the bus rapid transit, also making sure once again that when we're dealing with the MTA, that the MTA is not taking away bus service and bus routes, but looking strategically at where bus services and bus routes are, making sure that bus services and bus routes have improved time, looking at how we can make sure to improve transportation, improve traffic flow, because traffic flow here on Staten Island, we know that between certain times and certain times, especially when school lets out, the traffic slows up immensely. So how do we improve traffic flow here on Staten Island? How do we improve access? How do we improve timeliness? Because I know for a fact that I've waited at the Staten Island Ferry, gotten off the ferry, waited at the Staten Island Ferry to be able to get to work and almost been fired from my job because the buses did not show up. So how do we make sure that we're holding the MTA accountable so that buses are even showing up on time so that people can get to work on time? This is what government is supposed to do. This is what your elected officials are there to do, to hold government accountable, to be that voice, to be that individual that's going to be that bridge, I always say. So I'm really excited about the opportunities and the potential. But once again, I want to make sure that those bus lanes and all those things that we need are being done the right way.
Thank you, Amoy. We'll be moving on to question number 4. This question comes from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. The built environment impacts a community's ability to thrive and encompasses safe parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and neighborhood design, in addition to the necessities of affordable housing, access to fresh and healthy food, and transportation infrastructure. As our City Council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disinvestments?
So the first thing I think about is food insecurity. Here on Staten Island, specifically here on the North Shore, we have a very huge food insecurity problem. For every, usually in the community, there's a grocery store for every 9,000 people. Here on Staten Island, there's a grocery store for every 17,000 people. So that right there can show you how food insecure we are. Also, the access to grocery stores. People have to travel a much longer distance to get to a grocery store, which means that people are using their cars and other forms of public transportation, which means they're not being able to get out and walk, which is healthier. So one of the things that we're thinking about when you think about city council members, how to improve people's quality of life. So making sure that we have access to more supermarkets, and that the supermarkets are accessible in all different neighborhoods so that people can walk to supermarkets. Making sure that we have access to more green markets, thinking about fruits and vegetables and healthy, natural and organic food. So more green markets. I think we definitely need more green markets. I'm a big believer in the fact that we don't have enough clinics. I always say this: we live in a crisis care society, not a healthcare society. And the fact of the matter is that what we should be looking at is how to be more preventative and not to be so reactive as in a healthcare system. So when thinking about being preventative, we have to make sure that people have access to spaces and green spaces to be able to walk, which means they need to have access to sidewalks. So we need to make sure that we're building out our sidewalks. We need to make sure that we're creating, have accessibility to food. We have to make sure we have accessibility to public parks and spaces and recreation centers. All these should be in walking distance, no matter where you live. It shouldn't matter where you live. It shouldn't matter where you come from. All these things should be accessible to you. And also having access to a clinic, so that people could be able to get wellness care and not crisis care. So everything is connected. It's not just one thing. And my belief is, as city council is, once again, I always say this, they are about basic quality of life and quality of living, and making sure that those funding and those resources are available to create these resources for our community.
Amoy, thank you. We're going to move on to our 5th and final question. And I just want to have a trigger warning here for this question. We'll also be putting some NYC wellness in the chat. In 2020, nearly half of Staten Island's 11 deadly traffic crashes occurred on the North Shore. Additionally, 41% of Staten Island's 4,128 total traffic crashes happened on the North Shore. What will you do to stop traffic violence?
So when thinking about traffic, we have to always be mindful of what are the preventative things we could do to slow down traffic. At the end of the day, traffic is in driving culture. We have to change driving culture. And so working with the Department of Transportation, I think there are many different ways that we can creatively look at changing driving culture. I know people don't like speed cameras, but what speed cameras do is that they actually change driving culture. Nobody wants to get a ticket. I don't want to get a ticket. but different things to slow us down and make people more aware of where they are. Protected bike lanes, and bike lanes help slow people down and make people more aware when thinking about driving. These are things that we have to do and that we know exist. One thing that I always say is that I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I just think it just hasn't gotten to Staten Island yet. things have been done in other places, and all it has to be done, all we have to do is bring it here. And so really, I think there's just so many different creative opportunities. Also looking at bringing in possible changing the way our traffic lights work. There's certain traffic lights that are actually change with the what do you call the traffic flow, and it's like automatic. There's these new traffic lights. So there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of investing in creative and new technologies that already exist that can actually change the way people drive. We can do this. We are the greatest city in the world, at least I think so. And we can look at what has been done in other places and pilot those programs here. There's a lot of opportunity, and I want to bring those opportunities here. So really thinking about protected bike lanes, thinking about those traffic lights that actually change depending on the traffic flow, to change up, to look at how traffic is done, and also, even looking at changing the way our roads are done. One thing that we know here on Staten Island is that our roads cannot be expanded. We live on an island, so not too many of our roads can be expanded. So how can we be creative about taking people out of their cars and putting people in alternative forms of transportation, so people don't have to drive as much, because people are driving because they have to, and we have to find other alternatives to them driving.
Thank you, Amoy. We have one more lightning round question, which you'll have a minute to respond. And again, time is being kept in the chat. So the lightning round questions are to help to get to know fun things about our candidate and to lighten things up just a bit. We would like you to name one song that you are embarrassed to say that you love.
Oh my God. A song I'm trying to say that I'm embarrassed to say that I love. Oh my goodness. Well, I watch a lot of TikTok, so if it's on TikTok, then I love it. So I guess I'm saying to everybody, I'm watching a lot of TikTok. My next thing is to become a TikTok superstar. So, watch out for Amoy Barnes, future city council member, TikTok superstar.
Amoy, thank you so much again for joining us and for really taking a deep dive into all of these questions. And I'll keep an eye out on TikTok, certainly.
Thanks. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. I appreciate it.
Next up, we are going to hear from Selina Grey. And again, just to remind everyone, each candidate is going to have approximately 20 minutes, 4 minutes for their personal introduction and opening remarks, 3 minutes per question, 1 minute fun lightning round question, and about 3 minutes for buffers in case questions need to be repeated or we're having technical difficulties. Welcome, Selina. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Selina Grey, and I am a candidate running for the 49th City Council District. And I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, because many of you probably don't know. I'm a mom of 2 beautiful ladies that I raised here in Staten Island. I take care of my mom right now, who currently has dementia. And I decided to jump in this race because I love the North Shore of Staten Island. I've worked with progressive candidates and progressive campaigns to get people elected that had the same ideology as I did. And we know that City of New York is facing a major budget crisis, a $12 to $14 billion deficit. And we need to make sure that the person that sits in that seat can navigate the deficit and the 2 pandemics, which we currently are facing, which is not only COVID, but a social justice pandemic. We know we need a hospital here in Staten Island. We also know that we need to cure what's going on with social justice right now. If that means reallocating money for our NYPD and putting into social justice programs and even transportation, that's needed. That's what we need to do. And I believe that I'm that person that can make it happen. I love Staten Island. I love the community. I've been here for quite some time working in different organizations and even working with you, Sarah, in Therapeutic Gardens. So I'm ready to take all your questions and I look forward. Thank you. Thank you, Transportation Alternatives and all the partners, and you, Sarah, for taking time out of your evening and your family to host this. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selina. We're going to transition to the 5 questions.
Thank you.
This question, again, is by La Comena. How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges they face on Staten Island? Again, immigrant workers spend 70% of their paycheck on housing and transportation, but yet they are often left out of these extremely important conversations.
Well, as our next city council person, my job is to ensure that everybody's included in the conversation, including stakeholders. A lot of times we don't go out and meet our community where they are. That's something that I've always done and I will continue to do. Have them at the table, have all stakeholders at the table and ask what they want, because a lot of times decisions are made and it kind of ticks people off because they're not aware. There's no transparency. It's important that everyone is at the table to make those decisions for their community, because we know that there's the North Shore of Staten Island is probably the most diverse community out of all the 51 districts. And we need to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table and that they're connected to what's going on in their communities. So as your next city council person, I will make sure that they have a seat at the table and all stakeholders involved in all decisions.
Thank you so much, Selina. We're going to transition to the second question.
Mhm.
And this question is coming from the Harbor Ring. Given the documented surge in bike ridership across Staten Island's North Shore, as well as the rest of New York City, do you believe it's time to expand bike and pedestrian access to the Verrazano Bridge?
Yes, I agree. It's time for that. But the challenge that we have with Staten Island at this point is expanding our roadways to make sure that we have protected bike lanes and that we have that connectivity to the Verrazano Bridge. But I'm supportive of ensuring that we do get bikes on the Verrazano Bridge and everybody has that option to ride. One of the things that I would like to propose is that we take that bike path off of Bay Street and connect it to Front Street. We know that we have a big development going on the waterfront right now, and that needs to be included. That bike share and then expanding the bike lanes could be included in that project. And we should be looking at that. And I don't think that a lot of us are looking at that or even proposing that. We need to move that bike lane off of the Bay Street area and put it onto Front Street, because we do have an issue with protective bike lanes. I have one of my campaign managers comes from Brooklyn to visit me, and she calls Richmond Terrace Richmond Terra, because it's a shared bike lane. And bikes are always crossing over, cars are always crossing over. It's really dangerous for our bikers, and we need to provide access where they do have those protected lanes. And I think that Front Street is a beginning. It's not the end all, but it's the beginning. And you could hook right up into Highland Boulevard and keep moving to east and west of Staten Island, which there's no connectivity. So that's something that I would like to propose and that I would support and advocate for.
Selina, thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to transition to our third question. Staten Island is the most bus-dependent borough in New York City by far. The fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to improve bus service for Staten Islanders is through the expansion of bus-only lanes, which the DOT has the power to install at this very moment. Do you support expansion of bus lanes? And what other steps will you take to improve our transit service?
Bus lanes are a great option, but I just told you in the last question that we have an issue with expansion of our streets, because we were a horse and carriage borough before all this density came to Staten Island and we started building. So we have an issue with density and expansion of our roads. But I will support bus only lanes if a study is done, and ask DOT to come in and see how does it impact our community? How does it impact the surrounding areas and the businesses? One of the things, somebody asked the question, would I support from Mariners Harbor to the ferry, just a bus only lane for like a part of the day? And I was like, wow, that's a great idea. But would that piss a lot of people off that live in the harbor and Arlington, who don't ride the bus, who don't even go to the ferry, that just maybe drop children off, or jobs are here in Staten Island? Again, that takes community input. Another thing that I would like to see is more forward-thinking transportation, like a monorail that's like in the Bayonne. We can connect to the Bayonne Bridge and have people drop off in the Bayonne Bridge and connect to a larger hub. We need to even look at cleaner transportation. Adding more buses to the road is not really a clean solution. So we also need to be looking at cleaner transportation as well as providing, and as well as can address moving people to and from faster. It has to be cleaner. It has to be climate friendly, because we don't want to put more buses that are dirty, that's dirty energy, or more cars on the road. So we need to look at cleaner alternatives as well.
Thank you so much, Selina. We're going to move to our fourth question.
Yeah.
This question is coming from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. The built environment impacts the community's ability to thrive and encompasses safe parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and neighborhood design, in addition to the necessities of affordable housing, access to fresh and healthy food, and transportation infrastructure. As our city council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disinvestments?
Well, I live in the harbor. And one of the things that I do know is we have a lot of food insecurities, number one. And I don't think that it's a disinvestment to say. I just believe like we have the power to make change here on the North Shore, and it's providing access and information to people. So can you just ask that question one more time? Sarah, I'm sorry, because it was a lot.
Absolutely, it's a very long question. No worries. I'm happy to repeat it. Would you like me to repeat the last portion or the entire?
Just the last portion, just the last portion.
As our city council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disinvestments?
So one of the things that I noticed on the North Shore of Staten Island, and I don't know if it's something that you've seen, that our waterfronts we don't have access to the waterfronts the way we should have. One of the things that I've noticed as I traveled from Arlington all the way to the ferry, that we're having 4 storage units put up. I don't think that those 4 storage units are providing the access that our community needs to see. We're not getting more grocery stores. We're not getting more access to the parks. It's not providing anything of value that will provide a quality of life for the people here in the North Shore. I think those 4 storage units, what they're going to do is provide more congestion on those roadways, because it is on Richmond Terrace. And those are things that we need to look at. We need to look at the zoning, and we need to look at the building that's going on here in the North Shore, because one of the things that is not being addressed is the zoning. And we know that zoning impacts our environment. And if we don't look at that as a whole and not piecemealing it with all the overdevelopment here in Staten Island, we're going to have really big issues. And we need to have a city council person that is willing to fight for rezoning borough-wide, working with the borough president, and also working with the mayor to ensuring that zoning in Staten Island happens in a way that does not disenfranchise our community, that we don't have the overdevelopment, that we don't have those storage stores going up, and that we have the right type of development that actually move Staten Island forward and not make it a borough of not parks, because we're supposed to be the borough of parks, and people move here because of that. They move here for quality of life. And I feel that if we don't address the zoning, that that's all going to go by the wayside. And that's a lot of would address all these issues that we're talking about this evening.
Thank you so much, Selina. We're going to move to our 5th and final question from our sponsors. And again, I want to just, for those of you who are joining us, provide a trigger warning for this question. We'll also be providing NYC Well resource in the chat. In 2020, nearly half of Staten Island's 11 deadly traffic crashes occurred on the North Shore. Additionally, 41% of Staten Island's 4,128 total traffic crashes happened right here on the North Shore. What will you do to stop traffic violence?
Well, I think that the DOT needs to be involved in that process and study where those crash sites are here in Staten Island. And what can the DOT do to remediate those crash sites that makes it safer for pedestrians, that make it safer for cyclists? I do believe that the DOT needs to come in and allocate money to those studies. And I don't want to study it to death, but look and see what we can do to remediate it, because I can't tell you why all those traffic accidents happen, but I know that drivers in Staten Island, I could tell you, I'm just driving to the store, and just because I'm doing 25 miles an hour, somebody's trying to run me off the road, and that's not acceptable. I do believe that the traffic cameras have helped, but the traffic cameras become punitive, and it's an income revenue raiser for the city. And that, to me, is something that a lot of our residents push back on. Why isn't there any transparency to tell us where the traffic cameras are? I think that would be a more acceptable measure. And if you really are concerned about slowing down the drivers and having people go 20 to 25 miles an hour, why don't we know where those traffic cameras are? Because it becomes punitive. And again, they're raising revenue on the backs of working class people, poor people, and that's something that's not acceptable either. So one of the things like I said, I suggested that the DOT come in and do a study in those areas where those crash sites are happening to make sure that they can remediate those areas. And education, I don't even know that a lot of people know when emerging shared bike and car lane are happening on Richmond Terrace. Educate people in knowing what those signs look like. Because right now, I don't think people even know what that is. Make that part of the driver's ed. Make that part of the process when you go and get your driver's license, that you're educated to know what those signs look like. And when you're merging into a shared bike lane, that you know what that looks like. And because I don't believe that enough time and money and education is put into that. So education and remediation are the two things that I think can actually help those those issues here on Staten Island, the crash sites.
Thank you so much, Selina. We're going to transition to our lightning round question. And this is a fun question where we can get to know you. What is your favorite dessert and where can the rest of us find it here on Staten Island?
I have to say, I'm a chocolate lover and I love my own baking. So I do a lot of cooking at home. So I'm going to say that my favorite dessert is my chocolate cake. And you can come to my house to get it. So that I really love baking and I love cooking, and my chocolate cake to me is the best.
Well, it looks like we're going to end this community forum right now, and I'll stop over for a piece of chocolate cake, Selina.
Oh,
all right, God. Just kidding. Thank you so much, Selina, for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much for having me this evening. I look forward to hearing all the other candidates. Thank you, candidates, and all the people from the community for joining tonight, because you could have been doing something else, but you're here.
Thank you again, Selina. We're going to transition next to our next candidate, Troy McGhee. Welcome, Troy. Before you jump in, I'm just going to go over again. You'll have 4 minutes for personal introductions and opening remarks, 3 minutes per question, and we have 5 questions. And of course, our 1 minute lightning question and approximately 3 minutes for buffer, repeating questions, and if we have technical difficulties. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I want to thank Rose for holding this forum and all of the partners that help you put it together. And thank you for having me. And let's get this going. So I'm Troy McGhee, and I'm a candidate for City Council of 49th District. I'm a lifelong Staten Islander, born and raised on the North Shore, and I love my community. I am a Department of Education educator, been so for 20 plus years, where I have served the community. I'm a coach, I am a mentor, and I am also a community liaison for our current council member. And in that position, I've gotten to understand Staten Island communities' struggles, I've understand their concerns, and I've been in a position to champion their issues to our current council member to make some change. But as far as transportation and transportation alternatives, I don't need to tell you. Staten Island is one of the largest, has one of the largest commutes anywhere in the country. And our quality of life concerns, we basically begrudgingly accept our quality of life transportation wise because we love the things that Staten Island offers. Many of us in the North Shore, we put up with these commutes, and we get ourselves in situations where we look at transportation on express buses or even our city buses, and we say to ourselves, you know, why do we have to sit in traffic? Why do we have to pay $7 to get from here to there? Why do I have to be on a bus that gets me to the ferry and I just missed the boat by a minute? It's because of our traffic issues. It's because we as individuals should have a better quality of life. So when I'm your council member, I'm going to have a 4-point plan that addresses our transportation issues. And you can find that on my site, Troy McGhie NYC at medium.com, and I'll lay it out. But I just want to say in closing, commuting takes a toll on us all mentally, physically, and emotionally. And every minute that we're in traffic is moments that we can spend with our family, relaxing at home and having good experiences. But more importantly, our lack of public transportation on the North Shore stops us from having great economic advantages and feasible times for us to be to our jobs, and gives us, it takes away time for us to make money and time for us to have shared experiences. There's no reason why we shouldn't have transportation going from Staten Island to Midtown Manhattan, why we shouldn't have transportation going from Manus Harbor to New Jersey or Brooklyn, or even to Newark Airport. And these are things that I'm going to propose as your city council and give us alternative ways to get to work in a more efficient way and to be able to spend more time with our family and more times in our jobs earning income. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Troy. We're going to transition to our first question. Again, our first question is brought to you by La Colmena. How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges they face on Staten Island? Immigrant workers spend 70% of their paycheck on housing and transportation, but yet they're often left out of these very important conversations.
So thank you for that question, Sarah. My campaign is about inclusiveness. It's about getting things done for everyone. And part of that is bringing people to the table to have a voice. I'm not running for city council for myself. I'm running for the whole North Shore, and that's everyone. I'm looking to bring resources to not only one part of Staten Island, but to the whole North Shore. And I would bring people to the table. I would give them a voice. I would empower them. And we together, collectively, because this is what this is all about. It's about us working together and me being a voice for the whole community so that you don't have to spend 70% of your income on housing, and you don't have to spend 70% of your income on transportation combined. You should be able to have affordable housing. You should be able to have transportation that meets your expectations as a resident of North Shore of Staten Island and be able to have a good quality of life.
Thank you so much, Troy. We're going to transition to our second question. And this question again is coming from the Harbor Ring. Given the documented surge in bike ridership across the Staten Island's North Shore, as well as the rest of New York City, do you believe it's time to expand bike and pedestrian access to the Verrazano Bridge?
Sarah, I do. I do believe that it's time to expand it. What I would like to see is that it gets done safely and that we have protected lanes for our bikes to go across the Verrazano Bridge. We have ways for bicyclists and pedestrians to go across the Bayonne Bridge. I don't see why that shouldn't happen on the Verrazano Bridge. I don't see why New York City cannot provide a safe way for pedestrians and bicyclists, be a dedicated lane, just like on the Brooklyn Bridge or just like on the Bayonne Bridge. It can be done. It's a matter of, does the MTA want to get it done? And, you know, we just realized lately the MTA has raised our bridges again. And I think that they should take some of that money and put it into alternative transportation and make bike lanes and pedestrian lanes across the Verrazano Bridge something that we can look forward to in the future.
Thank you so much, Troy. We're going to transition to our next question. Question number 3. Staten Island is the most bus-dependent borough in New York City by far. The fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to improve bus service for Staten Islanders is through expansion of bus-only lanes, which the DOT has the power to install at this very moment. Do you support the expansion of bus lanes? And what other steps will you take to improve our transit service?
Staten Island, as we all know, is a very car-heavy society. I do support the expansion of bus lanes. I think that we need to create a situation where not only are bus lanes expanded, but we look into alternate types of transportation. New York City has promised us a BRT along the North Shore. Where is that? How come we cannot get dedicated bus routes? And I'm not saying along Richmond Terrace, they need to be figured out where it would go. But how come we don't have that BRT that would bring people from Manus Harbor down to the ferry or bring people from the North Shore into Jersey? But what I really, really, really would like to see, and would be one of my initiatives and proposals to New York City, is that we use our waterways to our benefit. That we have dedicated ferry services that connect to the Staten Island ferry and have stops along the way on the North Shore that bring us to the ferry. That we have ferries that go from Staten Island into Jersey, because people also work in Jersey from Staten Island. That we have ferry services that bring us from Staten Island to Midtown Manhattan and into Brooklyn, and give us alternative ways to use transportation to get to these sites. I think that we, as an island, don't use our waterways in a way that is beneficial for us. So I would highly, highly recommend, when I become city council member, for us to start finding a way to access our waterways, which will cut down on car use, which will cut down on the overcrowdedness of buses, and which will get us from point A to point B in a much more efficient and a much more timely manner.
Troy, thank you so much. This next question is coming from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. The built environment impacts the community's ability to thrive and encompasses safe parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and neighborhood design, in addition to the necessities of affordable housing, access to fresh and healthy food, and transportation infrastructure. As our city council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disinvestments?
So Sarah, my plan is for 20-minute communities. And what do I mean by that? I mean that in every community, within 20 minutes, you have a grocery store, you have quality healthcare, you have a school, and you have parks. So you can get to all of those things within 20 minutes of the middle of that community. Think about that. No matter where you are, Manus Harbor, West Brighton, New Brighton, St. George, Rosebank, you have all of those essential needs so that we don't have food insecurities. So we don't have people traveling an enormous amount of time to get to school. So we don't have medical deserts. Within 20 minutes by foot, you can have all of those things in arm's reach. And that's my plan, to set up these communities, have the city provide the funding so that someone who is in Manus Harbor doesn't have to come all the way down into West Brighton or go all the way to Staten Island University Hospital to get quality medical care. That will be within reach in your community within 20 minutes walk. If you are going to take a bus, or you're going to take car service, or if you have an automobile, it's even less time. but it's going to be there in your community, which will make your community thrive, which will make your community now feel more secure and will lift you up. So that's my plan.
Troy, thank you so much. We're going to transition to our fifth and final question from partners. In 2020, nearly half of Staten Island's 11 deadly traffic crashes occurred on the North Shore. Additionally, 41% of Staten Island's 4,128 total traffic crashes happened right here on the North Shore. What will you do to stop traffic violence?
So what I would do to stop traffic violence on the North Shore is, one, more traffic controls. All right. I'm going to go on a record right now and say I'm not a fan of the speed cameras. I'm not. I think they're a money grab, and I'm not a fan. But I do think that there's a way that DOT and DOT would come in and we would have a conversation and they would do some studies. But I do believe that there's a way that the DOT can improve the traffic patterns that are on the North Shore. I think we need to take a dedicated look at where these incidents occur and why they occur and what we can learn from them. I think speed bumps are a thing that can help. I cannot tell you, as going around and meeting people and asking them their concerns, how people are telling me, Troy, there's speeding going on and we can't get any kind of change to it. DOT can do surveys. DOT can put in speed bumps. They can put in stop signs. They can control traffic patterns with red lights. So we need to be able to sit down collectively, stakeholders, DOT, myself as the leader of the community and as the council member, and find efficient ways to control the traffic patterns so that the number of fatalities drop. I mean, New York City put in Vision Zero, not successful. If we still have same amount of accidents that we have, we need to be able to have motor vehicles, bicyclists, pedestrians share the streets and have it be safe. You go and you look at other places like Holland, France, where there's a lot of people moving around, there's a lot of bicycles on the road. They don't have the amount of fatalities that we have. We need to learn, we need to find out, we need to take control of the traffic patterns on the North.
Troy, thank you so much. We have our lightning question, and it's just a quick, fun question to get to know our candidates here today. You're
starting to worry me. You're starting to worry me with this.
You have 1 minute to answer. And our lightning round question for you is, what is your favorite series to binge watch on Netflix?
All right, I'm going to say this. I'm probably going to embarrass myself, but during the pandemic, I was looking for something to watch, and I asked some of my friends, you know, what's good, what's new, and they told me about a show called Schitt's Creek. I didn't like the first 2 seasons, but as I got further along, I'm kind of hooked now. I can't wait to figure out how it ends and finish it up. But I'm going to say that is one of my favorites to watch. I have a second series that I like to watch, and this is almost embarrassing, Sarah. It's called Married at First Sight. And I'm going to recommend that for you. People meet, they've never met before, they get married, and they take you through a 6-week trial, and then they decide if they want to stay together or not. So that would be my 1A, Married with First Sight.
Well, Troy, I know what I'll be binge watching tonight. So thank you so much for those recommendations. And thank you for joining us today for the Candidate Forum.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rose. And thank you all the partners for putting this together. I had a great time. Thank you very much.
We're going to transition to our next candidate. Okay, it looks like what we're gonna do is hear from our next candidate and we'll come back to Ranti. Welcome, Kelvin Richards. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm here. I hope Ranti fixes his computer. Thank you.
Kelvin, would you like me to go over today's time frame, or are you comfortable with introducing yourself?
Yes, I'm comfortable. I heard it. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelvin Richards. I'm a public defender here on Staten Island for the past 9.5 years. I'm running for city council because I believe we need a fighter. I've been doing that in criminal court, fighting for the voiceless. My story, hey, brother Ranti, my story is quite unique. My mom is from Ghana, my dad is from Liberia. When I was 9 years old, I found myself in the refugee camp in Ghana. The work of the UN workers actually inspired me because I saw the passion of people who don't know helping you out. I came here after high school and I live on Park Hill, worked overnight, went to CSI, got a scholarship, went to law school, came back and started working as a public defender. What inspired me to go to law school was just my interactions growing up and living in public housing and being stopped and frisked numerous times. So I believe in actually building a North Shore that is good for our kids. I have 2 kids I'm raising here in New Brighton, and I want to create the same opportunities that I had for my kids and all the residents on the North Shore. I want to fight for good paying jobs. I want to fight for affordable housing. I want to fight for small businesses. Like people have been saying far too often, the North Shore has been considered a forgotten borough, or we've been neglected. Why? Because it's like, well, we're not really the city. We're like the suburbs of the city. I think we're changing, and we have to face the realities of our growth. I care deeply about the transportation issues here on the North Shore. I believe in green space. I think we should preserve and expand our green spaces and our open spaces. You know, in the summertime, sometimes I walk to work from New Brighton. I work in the criminal court, like 10 minutes walk. And when the weather is not, if it's not bad, if it's not freezing outside, rainy, you know, I take a nice walk. I also bike sometimes. I remember pre-COVID, we had the red bikes on the North Shore and city bike. The problem is it was very uncomfortable. You know, I used to bike on the terrace to go to the gym, Crunch Gym, and boy, when I'm biking, I'm looking behind me. You know, I as a kid, I was told when you're biking, you should face traffic so you can see the cars that's coming towards you. But I mean, the roads are just tight, they're congested. It's uncomfortable for people when you're biking. And those are things I think we have to actually address and envision. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to give my positions on our issues here on North Shore. And I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Rose. I want to thank you, Sarah, and the committee. I want to thank all my my fellow colleagues who are running, that we took up the time on the beautiful day to speak to you fine folks. Thank you.
Kelvin, thank you so much. We're going to transition to our questions. Our first question, again, is by La Colmena. How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges they face on Staten Island? Immigrant workers spend 70% of their check on housing and transportation, but yet they're often left out of these very important conversations.
Well, first, we have to actually improve our transportation on the North Shore. The fact that we have just one light rail and just one route, to me, is unacceptable. I represented a guy 2 years ago who at the ferry, he got so mad the bus driver was late that when the bus came, he got into the fight with the bus driver and he got arrested for assault on I'm laughing, it's not funny, but I'm just saying how frustrating it could be when you're waiting for the bus at the ferry and you see the bus driver in the bus, but he's waiting for a specific time to take off. That's so frustrating. And you're in a rush, you from work, I've been there. So we have to actually improve our transportation system on the North Shore. When it comes to our immigrants, listen, I empathize with all immigrants, especially those that are considered undocumented, because most of them cannot have driver licenses legally. I know a law passed that took effect, but the requirements to actually get a driver license is harder. And I represent a lot of undocumented immigrants where they're arrested for driving because they have to drive. They're handyman, they're gardeners. They have all this work that they need to drive. And if they drive and they get stopped for not having a license, they end up in criminal court. I think it should be a civil crime if you're driving without a license. I don't think you should get arrested. And some of them have to literally go to Maryland. Just think about it, Maryland of all places, to get a Maryland driver license to drive in New York City. The reason why it's important to have these people have driver licenses here is because then they could have insurance. And like your prior question stated, the North Shore has the highest amount of crashes. Do you know how frustrating it is to have a crash and the person on the other end doesn't have insurance? Think about it. It's going to help our safety. It's going to help when we have these crashes to know that the person across this in the next car has a license regardless of the immigration status, and they have insurance in case these things happen. So I will bring most immigrants, all of them, on the table. I will advocate for them to have their driver licenses, and I will fight to make sure that we improve the transportation on the North Shore. Thank you.
Kelvin, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our second question. And this question again is coming from our partners at the Harbor Ring. Given the documented surge in bike ridership across Staten Island's North Shore, as well as the rest of New York City, do you believe it's time to expand bike and pedestrian access to the Verrazano Bridge?
Yes, I do. What bothers me is, instead of talking about bike, why can't we just have a train, like you have in Brooklyn? A train connects the borough. Do you know how easy that would be to just leave Staten Island to Brooklyn or Manhattan or wherever in 5 minutes instead of waiting on the ferry for 25 minutes? So yes, if we could have pedestrians walk and bike on the Gatos Bridge, why can't we do it on the Verrazano? That's going to reduce the amount of cars that we have in traffic. And that's going to help our quality of life. That's actually going to improve and help, our mental health. Is going to help with on time when you have to go to work. Most people come to Staten Island because, again, like I stated earlier, it's considered the suburb of the city. So they like to work in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, and so forth. And they like to come here. And I believe that if we could improve and connect the DACT, connect Staten Island to Brooklyn and other parts of the city, that's actually going to save time, that people will go to work, come back on time, instead of going to the ferry. Things have, to be fair, it has improved. I remember 18 years ago, the ferry was every hour. You have to, when you miss the boat, you have to wait for an entire hour for the next boat. Then it went to on 30 minutes. When you miss the boat, and sometimes you'll be running and they'll see you and they'll close the door right for the bye with 30 minutes. You have to wait for another 30 minutes. Now I understand we have rush hour, it's 15 minutes. Still, New York City will never sleep. We're always on the go. It's time that we connect the North Shore to the rest of the city. We cannot be the forgotten borough, and we cannot be left behind. Thank you.
Kelvin, thank you so much for your answer. We're going to transition to our next question. Staten Island is the most dependent borough in New York City by far. The most dependent bus borough in New York City by far. The fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to improve bus service for Staten Islanders is through the expansion of bus-only lanes, which the DOT has the power to install at this very moment. Do you support the expansion of bus lanes? What other steps will you take to improve our transit service here on Staten Island?
Well, what I would do first, I will convene a study to see how we can improve our bus routes, the time. And yes, I do support expansion of bus lanes, but I think I'm going to go further. What I also want to do is I want to change some of our congested streets to no parking, certain parts. Again, let me just go on the record. Not every street. Certain streets are so congested that it have to be no parking. Example, certain parts of Bay Street is extremely tight. Certain part of Victory Boulevard. I also envision on the North Shore in the congested parts where we could actually change some of these streets from two-way to one-way. What it does is going to actually improve traffic flow, and so forth. I know it's people might say, well, if then I have to go around, but well, if it's going to improve traffic and it's going to prevent crashes and it's going to create a bike lane and it's going to create open spaces, that's something we have to adapt to. But again, we cannot punish our people on the North Shore if we do not create the infrastructure first to bring about these changes. So for instance, you cannot mandate people to bike or take the bus or walk on the North Shore if you don't have the infrastructure first in place to give them the option to. Because I think it's going to be unjust to demand that people should take the bus when the bus is coming irregularly, when you cannot predict the time the bus is going to be there. So first, we have to invest in a rapid bus system. We have to expand our streets. We have to do a study to actually decide which streets are going to be closed for no parking, where we'll have open spaces, where we're going to have our restaurants have on tables and chairs and benches outside where people could walk, our kids could play in the street and so forth. Once we have that in place, then people by nature will have an alternative. But if we don't do those investments, I think it's going to be a hard sell to the community to demand that we're going to expand the street or we're going to change certain lanes to one way from two way.
Kelvin, thank you so much for your response. And it's a great segue to our next question. And that question is coming from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. The built environment impacts a community's ability to thrive and encompasses safe parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and neighborhood design, in addition to the necessities of affordable housing, access to fresh and healthy foods, and transportation infrastructure. As our City Council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disenfranchisement?
Well, what I would do first is what I started, I think, in 2014. You know, in 2014, I witnessed. I didn't witness. I came on the scene like 10 minutes later of two crashes. One killed a guy. He was on his bike around Tarji. The next killed a little girl, Osgood, and I couldn't sleep. I was like, wow, because this little girl body on the floor, and so it's just I was so disturbed that I did a petition. I literally walked around Park Hill community, getting signatures to do a petition for speed bumps in and around Park Hill, and I sent it to our elected officials, and I sent it to the Department of Transportation. I got a letter back a few weeks later on that they were going to do a resurvey of the area, and if you go on Park Hill, you will see speed bumps. That's something I actually believe in because I believe in safety. I also play soccer. You know, I you know, when you grow up internationally, you're into sports, and soccer is actually big. I normally used to go to Bloomingdale or Broadway in West Brighton to play soccer, but there's a park right in Stapleton. The Reverend Howard, the park was renamed on playground. And a lot of the immigrant community live in and around Park Hill, Clifton, and so forth. So people got to get on the bus to go and play sports all the way in Broadway. Take two buses sometimes, or people have to carpool to go to Bloomingdale. And I said, well, we have a park right here. You know, it's not fixed. What I did a petition also. I walked around Clifton for a week. I got more than 700 signatures so they could improve the park. And I checked on the park's website. The park is supposed to open this year. I'm saying that to say that we need to actually improve our public spaces, our parks, and we also need to improve, we need to connect our North Shore communities where we could have access to cleaner and greener spaces and food. When you live on, I live in the Brighton, so let's say if someone lives on Jersey Street and they want to shop and they don't drive, and I'm advocating that they shouldn't drive, the nearest um, uh, um, supermarket is Key Foods. Just imagine if you're not driving, you have to take the bus to the ferry, then you have to take another bus to Key Foods, or you have to walk to Key Foods. After Key Foods is Western Beef. Same thing. You have to take a bus to the ferry, another bus to Western Beef. I think if we had a bike lane that connected the entire wetlands and the waterways, you could bike or you could walk, safely from Jersey Street to Key Foods or on Western Beef. I also want to bring a Trader Joe's to the Empire Outlet. I think we need to actually give our people on the North Shore the option to not only shop in Western Beef, but have a store like Trader Joe's. So again, I think we tell our people, well, eat healthy and so forth, but we have to give them.
Kelvin, I hate to stop you. The time is up for that
Thank you.
question. Thank you again. You did have me at Trader Joe's. I'm a personal fan of that. So thank you for that idea. We're going to move on to our fifth question. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, I see we have some new participants. I do want to have a trigger warning and let everyone know that we do have NYC Well in the chat as a mental health resource. In 2020, nearly half of Staten Island's 11 deadly traffic crashes occurred right here on the North Shore. Additionally, 41% of Staten Island's 4,128 total traffic crashes happened on the North Shore. What will you do to stop traffic violence?
I believe in speed cameras, but I only believe them in certain key circumstances. I believe them they should be around schools. They should be around hospitals, and I don't think it's smart to have them everywhere because I think that the city is trying to make money. What we need to do is actually study those locations, and I can guarantee you, a man was hit. I think few weeks ago, a 78-year-old man was hit by a bus right here in New Brighton. Again, the reason because of congestion. We need to actually clear up our curves where buses turn. We have to expand our roads. We have to work on expanding our roads and changing some of the streets from two-way, like I stated, to address traffic flows and so forth. Because if we do these things, just imagine driving on Forest Avenue or Victory Boulevard. You have car parked both ways. You have a little tiny bike lane, and you have buses, and on the same road. And it's just going to be inevitable. You're going to have crashes, and the reason you see it more in the North Shore is because the North Shore is the most condensed and the most crowded. Your question is embedded that 90% of these crashes happen in North Shore. There's a reason for that. You don't see that happening on Timeville. Go to Bloomingdale. You're never going to see that happen because when you go to Bloomingdale, you see spaces. You see wider roads. You see places where you can't park your car. And that's what I envision on the North Shore. And the way, again, I'm going to repeat myself. The way you do that is first, you address the infrastructure problem with the streets, public transportation, and the option for people to not drive. The goal is to reduce the amount of cars on the street. The goal is to reduce the amount of cars parked on the street. So if we can do that, we're going to address those concerns. Hopefully I didn't go over the time this time around.
Kelvin, thank you so much. We do have one lightning round question. You'll have 1 minute to answer, and it's a fun question just to help everyone get to know our candidates. Your lightning question is, name a super secret skill of yours, completely unrelated to your candidacy. This can be knitting or perhaps that you're double jointed.
I already told you, it says secret skills. I told you I'm a soccer player. I play in the Mexican league on Broadway. They call me the big striker because I'm a number 9. Yeah, I love sports. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to listening to my colleagues. Thank you.
Kelvin, thank you again for joining us. We're going to transition to our next candidate, Ranti Ogunleye. Welcome.
Hey, Sarah, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ranti. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being so flexible with our run of show today. Would you like me to go over our time and our questions again with our rules, or are you comfortable doing your 4-minute personal introduction?
You can go in again. Gives me more time.
For those of us who are just joining us, we will be giving each candidate approximately 20 minutes, 4 minutes for personal introductions and opening remarks, 3 minutes per question, and there will be 5 questions, all of them the same from our community partners and sponsors, and a 1-minute fun lightning round question. We do have a 3-minute buffer time in case you need me to repeat questions or we're having technical difficulties. Welcome, Ranti, and please introduce yourself.
My name is Ranti Ogunleye, candidate for City Council of the 49th District, and I'm ecstatic to be here, Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me, Alternatives in Transportation. You guys, I really appreciate you trying to have this forum to make sure that community members are aware of this really important issue of transportation. So I'm grateful to be here. And thank you, Rose. Yeah, Rose be holding it down all the time. I think the community is best served when the answers are coming from the community. So that's really, so make sure Rose is on top of addressing these issues too, because she has all these great ideas on how to do it.
Thank you so much, Ranti. We're going to transition to our first question. And again, this question is coming from La Colmena. How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges they face here on Staten Island? Immigrant workers spend 70% of their paycheck on housing and transportation, but yet they are often left out of these very important conversations.
Okay, Sarah, I'm going to take a step back because for people who don't know me, I'm going to do my introduction. I was just, so people who are on for the first time, so they really know who I am. My name again is Ranti, and my parents migrated to this country over 50 years ago, and they raised me and my 3 siblings in the Park Hill section of Staten Island. Most people know Park Hill because of Wu-Tang Clan. I know it because it used to be my home, and it still is. I still have family members that live there, and I love the place. But the community still suffers because resources are not accessible to community members. So community members never get a chance to be their best selves. I was transformed by joining the after-school program in Global Kids when I got a chance to travel to Bosnia and Croatia to learn about sustainability and to work with refugees that had fled. Since then, I've been working in my community to fill gaps that the government hasn't. So when I think about transportation, and I think about the inequalities in transportation and the lack of access in transportation, you look square on the nose of why my slogan is a North Shore for all. How can we say to our community members, we value you, right, when 23% of our train stations are only ADA compliant? That's not a North Shore that is valuing all community members, and that's not a North Shore that's prioritizing our most vulnerable community members. So if elected, and when elected to the city council seat, my mission is about bringing everyone to the table, but making sure that everyone has access to this resource. Without transportation, we don't have access to healthcare. Without transportation infrastructure, we don't have access to education or proper education. So it begins with infrastructure, transportation infrastructure that works for all. And that's why I'm running for city council. So now we can go back to the other question, my sister. Appreciate it.
Ranti, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges they face on Staten Island? Immigrant workers spend 70% of their paycheck on housing and transportation, but yet they're often left out of these very important conversations.
Thank you for asking that question. As I stated in my earlier remarks, I'm the son of Nigerian immigrants. So my parents came here 50 years ago. as the current director of the Gerard Carter Center, my job is to work in the Stapleton community to provide wraparound services for our most vulnerable community members. And we're talking about our immigrant community members. So when we think about PPE distribution, food distribution, when we think about all the services that my center provides and the community members that were actually focused to provide those services, it is my immigrant community. It is the immigrant community. And when you have a pulse on the immigrant community, when you've been working with the immigrant community for over 20 years, you know what's going on. So it's easy to have conversations with community members and bring them to the table, because those are the same community members that you're seeing every day when you're going out to serve. So one, it's about making sure that their voices are heard, but making sure that there is a table, that they are welcome to the table. And it's by making sure that they see someone who's rooted in the community, who they trust. They trust me because they know that I've worked with them. It's also about working with organizations that are deeply rooted in the community, like La Cometa. I've worked tirelessly with La Cometa to get out the vote and to register people for the census. So it's about making sure that you're rooted in the community. It's making sure that the community members that you're working for, right, and you're working to support are a part of this process. Because I realize, and we all realize, just like I said earlier, when you have community a part of the solving solutions, then things actually change. I think about my time when I was working in the Bronx as a community school director, how by being late 1 minute to the ferry would make you late 1 hour, and potentially you could lose your job. Think about also how Staten Islanders have to be track runners, right? Because you got to run to the ferry. Because if you miss out on that ferry, that means you're going to be late to go pick up your child at my center. That means you're going to be late to your doctor's appointment. That means you're going to be late to that opportunity that might get you the job that you need to get to where you want to go. So we know how transportation and lack of transportation affects community members, but how much more for our immigrant community members who don't have, sometimes, especially when we think about our undocumented community members that don't have the documentation they need to, like, for driver's license. So it's really important that we fix our infrastructure. It's really important that we make a laser beam focus on addressing transportation, but alternatives to transportation. Because when we fix it for our North Shore, we're pretty much fixing it for everyone. And that's the type of leadership that we need.
Thank you so much, Ranti. We're going to transition to our next question. And this question is coming from our partners at the Harbor Ring. Given the documented surge in bike ridership across Staten Island's North Shore, as well as the rest of New York City, do you believe it's time to expand bike and pedestrian access to the Verrazano Bridge?
I absolutely do believe that it's time to expand. It's been time. It's past due, overdue, years ago. And how we know that in your recent Transportation Alternatives recent survey, I believe it's 65% of the people believe that there should be a designated bike lane, and that includes the Verrazano Bridge, right? But we also understand that what our elected officials have been telling us. They're telling us, no, we can't do it, right? We can't do it. But all the assessments and all the community members, the community will says we need it. This is how we begin to mitigate the issues that we see with transportation. It's not going to solve everything, but it's the beginning process of it. And I also want to talk about what Kelvin said, because he said the truth, right? It begins with transportation. It begins with our infrastructure, but infrastructure leads into everything else, right? So lack of true transportation infrastructure leads to us having some of the worst commute times in the nation. It also leads to what I said earlier, a more accessible community transportation system that focuses on the priorities of our disabled community members. Only 23% of our train stations are ADA compliant. That deals with infrastructure. They're all connected. And when we understand that, that's how we are able to address the bike, the situation that we see. We see too many stall projects like the BRT. We're not going to see that anymore with this bike share. We need leadership that's going to hold leadership accountable and build power. And that's what I plan to do when I get to the city council.
Ranti, thank you so much for your response. We're going to move on to our next question. Staten Island's the most bus-dependent borough in New York City by far. The fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to improve bus service for Staten Islanders is through expansion of bus-only lanes, which the DOT has the power to install at this very moment. Do you support the expansion of bus lanes? If so, what other steps will you take to improve our transit service?
Yes, I do believe in bus-only lanes. I talked about it earlier with the BRT, which we know that it's been sitting in the pipeline for 5 years. So this is a project that was studied, approved, and it's been sitting in the pipeline for 5 years. And we know if it's actually pushed, it will drop commute time by 40 minutes. This is tremendous. But the question is, why hasn't it been actualized? We need to make sure that we begin this process of looking at our transportation system. We already have enough assessments. Is the process of beginning to mitigate these issues by actualizing projects like the BRT. But it's also about what I said in the beginning. Like, you're going to see some of these answers are redundant because it is the key. You can't get to B without starting from A. So A is infrastructure. Fix our roads, our potholes. How many times have people spent thousands of dollars on fixing their cars, right? Because the roads are messed up. So we have messed up roads. We don't have any sidewalks. Think about our senior citizens who have to walk from Toad Hill, go to the post office, go get their medication from CVS, and they have to kind of walk a tight rope, like you're on a tight walk to get to get services. That's insane. That's very dangerous. But what we need to do, because what happens is people don't know what happens is business owners are responsible for sidewalks. So we need to incentivize the business owners as well. If in order for you to build it here, you got to prioritize the community that lives here. So we need you to help build our infrastructure. You need to be a part of it. And if you need help, tell us. That's where the government fills those gaps. That's where the government fills those gaps. Right? So this is what we're talking about, responsible government, but compassionate government that's focused on our most vulnerable first. Build from there. Deal with the infrastructure and you'll deal with the timeliness. Deal with the infrastructure and you'll deal with treating our most vulnerable community members with respect and the dignity they deserve.
Thank you so much, Ranti. We're going to transition to the next question. And this question is coming from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. The built environment impacts a community's ability to thrive and encompasses safe parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and neighborhood design. In addition to the necessities of affordable housing, access to fresh and healthy food, and transportation infrastructure. As our City Council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disinvestments?
I love this question because this takes me to my new program that I just built, BU University, that is in collaboration with Make a Park. And the reason why that's even being able to happen is because Make a Park has a green space for it to happen. And I was able to bring it to the North Shore. When we think about our green spaces, when we think about access, again, I'm gonna beat a dead hole, nail over the head, right? It's definitely infrastructure, but it's also about having leadership that has an imagination. When you look at Brooklyn Park, why can't that happen here? Why can't that happen here? Why can't we have a space like that? We can, but we have to stop letting our elected officials say we can't have access to this. This is our land. We pay taxes. We deserve to our leadership to give us better access of our waterfront. Staten Island has a beautiful historic waterfront, and we need better access for that. In order for us to realize this community that is actually less dependent on cars, less dependent on these things that are harming us, we need to fix our infrastructure. We need to give them the opportunities to say, you know what? I actually don't need a car. I'll take this bike to work, right? We need to actually do that, but we also need to provide a space, these spaces where they can imagine this space like this, where they can have access to this, right? And that also means they need to be a part of the ULURP process, right? It's not just for Community Board 1 members. COVID-19 has given us a way to reimagine that community members can be there. You know why? Because we're doing it on Zoom. So we need to now make sure that everyone who's not being seated at the table is a part of the table. That means working with the Department of Transportation. That means working with city planning. That means working with Rose. That means working with Sarah, community members. That means, because you know what? As much as they're been doing their assessments, you live here. So you're best placed too to remedy these issues that we're talking about. So when we're able to bring everybody to the table, when we're able to focus on infrastructure, when we're able to reimagine and imagine Staten Island in a different space, when we're able to build power and everybody's voice is included in this process, we're finally going to get the Staten Island that finally lives up to what I'm trying to make it, a North Shore for all.
Thank you so much, Ranti. We're going to transition to our last question. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, we're going to just share that this is a trigger warning for some, and we're also going to put in some NYC Well resources in the chat. In 2020, nearly half of Staten Island's 11 deadly traffic crashes occurred here on the North Shore. Additionally, 41% of Staten Island's 4,128 total traffic crashes happened on the North Shore. What will you do to stop traffic violence?
I'm gonna tell you the truth. I don't like speed cameras, but they're necessary. That's what good leadership is about. I don't like it. I get a ticket when I'm coming around Grant, so that means I got to slow down. But it's a necessary step in mitigating violent car crashes. So that's one step of it. But how about driver's assessments? The city does driver assessments where if you have a certain amount of tickets, you can't drive. Why don't we incentivize drivers to take more than these training courses that makes them re-educate themselves on defensive driving, right? We need to rethink about how we're educating the public about driving and safety. Also, again, infrastructure, okay? When we think about sidewalks, the lack of sidewalks, when we think about the lack of access to even rapid, when we think about access to alternatives in transportation, this is why more people are driving. We're not giving them any chances to do something different. So they have to drive. When we're able to fix our infrastructure, when we're able to pass these projects like the BRT that's been sitting for 5 years and needs to get passed, when we're able to actually increase our maritime use, right? And imagine how we can connect the other parts of the city to Staten Island, right? Because it is an island, and we've never ever had a true comprehensive plan to use it. We've never done that. What if a boat left from Arlington? Why it can't happen? Why? Because they're Black and brown folks? Why? That's why we don't think like that, right? Because it's Black and brown folks in Arlington. They don't deserve that type of access. We need to reimagine this, because if we do, it's going to help all of us. It's going to help all of us. So that's how we make it safer for community members. That's how we begin to take community members out of their cars and into a more sustainable Staten Island that they can leave better for their children. And that's how you keep people safe.
Ranti, thank you so much for your response and for highlighting inequities here that we see way too often here on the North Shore. Our final question is a lightning question, and it's a fun, quick question that you'll have 1 minute to respond to. Always. What is the weirdest topping that you would ever add to a pizza?
The weirdest topping that I would add to a pizza? Wow. I never thought about that. That's a real good question. The weirdest topping, maybe macaroni. Macaroni pizza. Don't sound good.
All right, Ranti, mixing the soul food with the pizza. I see you. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Ranti. We appreciate your time.
Peace and love. Thank you.
Next up, we are going to have our next candidate, Michael Schnall. Welcome, Michael.
Hi.
Hello, I'm going to go over very briefly the rules of engagement for tonight. We're going to have 4 minutes for personal introductions and opening remarks, 3 minutes per question. I'll be asking 5 of them. And our 1 minute lightning question, we also have 3 minutes for buffer time in case you need me to repeat questions or we have technical difficulties. Please introduce yourself, Mike.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to Rose and Transportation Alternatives. Thank you to everyone who waited until this late at night to hear from me. I appreciate your sticking around to hear the last candidate speak. And I want to thank my colleagues for all their great answers. I continue to be impressed by them. And now I have the opportunity to go last. I've heard everything they've had to say. So now hopefully I'll be able to inject something new into the conversation. So I'm running for the North Shore seat. I am a native New Yorker. I can't claim I'm a native Staten Islander because I moved here when I was 2. I grew up on the South Shore. I've lived on the North Shore for 21 years. I worked in government for 14 years, first at the New York City Council, and then almost 10 years at New York City Parks. And then the last 5 working for a large nonprofit in Manhattan. I am currently living the pandemic life as unemployed due to the pandemic, and I am a full-time candidate, and that's why I'm here with you tonight. So transportation is a critical piece of my life and my family's life. As someone who commuted 15 of 20 years into Manhattan, I took 3 modes of transportation every day. I got the bus, I got on the ferry, and then I got on the subway, and then I reversed that every day, 3 hours every day, for 15 of the last 20 years of my commuting life. So transportation is a critical piece of who I am as a human being. It's the cause of many of the remaining gray hairs that I have on my head. And it is a cause of a lot of the issues that families have across the borough. And I'll talk a little more about that in a second. My main focus is 2 things that are intertwined. It's making a council member office that's responsive to its constituency and getting them the city service they deserve, and making sure that we preserve, protect, and improve the quality of life on Staten Island. And when I say quality of life, that means both transportation and everything else. It's the litter on our streets. It's the potholes not being filled. It's the street trees that are not getting pruned. It's the parks on a Monday morning that are not clean. It is a lot of things that make us feel bad about where we live. And I think that the next council member it's going to be incumbent upon them when I get elected to make sure that we feel good about living on the North Shore. Too many people have too many bad things to say about Staten Island. That shouldn't be the case. We should only have good things to say about where we live. We should want to live here. And frankly, a lot of people do want to live here. And I think we need to do a better job of lifting up the North Shore as a great place to live, work, and play. I believe it is. I'm raising my daughters here. We have our friends, and we have lots of reasons to stay here. And I would like to continue to improve that feeling that we have about the North Shore. That's great. I will hold off on talking about transportation because the next 5 questions will allow me to do that. But I just want to thank you, everybody, for listening, and I'm ready for my first question.
Thank you so much, Mike. We're going to go to our first question. And again, our first question is submitted by La Comena. How do you plan to connect and hear from immigrant workers, day laborers, and domestic workers about the transportation challenges they face on Staten Island? Immigrant workers spend 70% of their paycheck on housing and transportation, but yet they're often left out of these important questions.
That's a great question. I will tell you that not unlike immigrants, I think most Staten Islanders are paying similar percentages of their income in transportation costs and in housing. So I think all of us deserve the dignity, respect that is needed to as New Yorkers and Staten Islanders and taxpayers. And I think that every day that we allow ourselves to be shortchanged in terms of the services we get a slap in the face from New York City. I think that the immigrant population in particular needs someone who's going to advocate for them. They very often haven't found their voice. They haven't found their political power because they're so afraid of all the rhetoric that was going on for the last 4 years under the previous presidential administration, fearing for their lives. Now we have an opportunity to undo much of the harm that was done. And I think providing them with all sorts of ways to reduce the costs of their transportation is critical. First, the city council passed in the budget in 2020 or 2019 was the Fair Fares program, and Mayor de Blasio refused to institute it. Why did he do that? I don't know. This is a mayor who talks about equity, and yet the one program that I felt would level the transportation playing field for low-income New Yorkers, he held it back for almost 9 months. Finally, it was instituted, but yet it is still not widely known. The next council member, my office, we will go out into the community and sign folks up for the Fair Fares program. We will bring the program to them. We don't expect them to come to the office or expect them to get on a computer that they don't have or access Wi-Fi that they don't have. We're going to sign them up. We're going to go to those street corners. We're going to go to the bodegas. We're going to go to the community centers. We're going to find folks who qualify for Fair Fares. We're going to get them signed up. How would I connect with them? Well, this is not rocket science. Again, you want to talk to them. You invite them into your meetings in your offices. You go to the nonprofits that are doing the exceptional work to serve the immigrant communities. And as the council member, you fund those nonprofits and you fund them year over year with baseline funding so that they can budget against what you've committed to support. I think that's critically important. That hasn't been done over the last 10 years. And I think those nonprofits that are doing work in the immigrant communities are doing God's work, and I'm going to support them. I think we have to continue to align and realign our bus lanes. I know the current borough president worked really hard and took a lot of heat for this, but look, our bus system was designed in Staten Island in the 1960s prior to a bridge being built. And a lot of our immigrant communities are living in places now that were never imagined to have been residential communities. So we need to bring those bus lines deeper into our underserved communities. And I will say I have one idea on this, which I want to share with everybody. You know, very often immigrant communities don't have access to banks and they don't have credit cards. So now the MTA wants to go to the Omni system, which is a completely cell phone and credit card based system. Now I know that my cell phone will die in the middle of the day for no reason. So if I don't have access to my cell phone or I don't have a credit card, how are you supposed to take a bus? We need to go back to a system where buses accept cash or change or some method of payment that immigrants feel more comfortable with.
Mike, thank you so much for bringing those points to the conversation today. We're going to transition to the second question. And again, this question is coming from our partners at the Harbor Ring. Yes.
The Harbor
Yes.
Ring. Yes. Okay.
Given the documented surge in bike ridership across Staten Island's North Shore, as well as the rest of New York City, do you believe it's time to expand bike and pedestrian access to the Verrazano Bridge?
Yes. So when I worked for New York City Parks for almost 10 years, 5 of that in Manhattan as the Director of Government Relations and almost 5 as the Chief of Staff in Staten Island, I supported the Harbor Ring. I remember having a meeting with the Harbor Ring folks when they first started out at the Alice Austin House, and we talked about the vision for how you could literally take yourself around the harbor of New York City. I thought it was brilliant. At the time, I didn't know that the MTA had actually done a study years before that showed that the Verrazano was built to support a bike lane. But subsequent to that, they've done more studies that keep jacking the price higher and higher and higher to make it so unpalatable to elected officials that it becomes cost prohibitive. Well, I'll tell you 2 things. One, the cost of doing something that is already there and ready to be built is much less than creating from scratch. So I'd like to unearth that study, bring that back to the fore and talk about that with the MTA. 2, wouldn't it be nice if our tolls that we pay for something that benefits Staten Island? You know that 75% of our tolls or more go to benefit other boroughs and other counties outside of New York City. That's insane. So whatever this costs for the Harbor Ring to connect Verrazano from Staten Island to Brooklyn, I don't care what it costs, frankly, because we're already paid for it over the last 30 to 40 years. What I will say is that I would make sure that that bike lane doesn't impede the flow of traffic. And anyone who's driven over the Verrazano knows that if you took out an entire lane of traffic, that would be detrimental. But I will say that if we do institute many of the ideas that people have in terms of reducing car traffic on Staten Island, that won't be a problem. And last thing, and I know I have 30 seconds, want to make sure that both entrances on the Staten Island side and the Brooklyn side to a bike and pedestrian path must be ADA accessible.
Thank you so much, Mike. We're going to move to our next question. Staten Island is the most bus-dependent borough in New York City by far. The fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to improve bus service for Staten Islanders is through the expansion of bus-only lanes, which the DOT has the power to install at this moment. Do you support the expansion of bus lanes, and what other steps would you take to improve our transit system?
Well, so as someone, again, who took 3 modes of transportation, 15 years of my 20 commuting into work, I know how dependent I was upon buses and how unreliable they were. So I would say that I am supportive of the expansion of bus lanes, but only if the bus drivers are using them. I mean, how many times have I gotten on a bus on Forest Avenue going down Victory Boulevard, and the bus driver doesn't use the dedicated bus lane on Victory Boulevard? I mean, how insane is it that they have that and they don't use it? Well, part of the reason why they don't use it is sometimes there are folks that park in a dedicated bus lane, so there needs to be more enforcement. But there also needs to be a culture of respecting certain pieces of infrastructure that you don't park in. Like, you don't park in a disabled spot, you don't park in front of a fire hydrant, and you don't park in a dedicated bus lane. We need to do a better job on all 3 of those. But if those, let's say for argument's sake that those bus lanes are completely clear, bus drivers are still not using them. And it boggles the mind that they wouldn't, because it does speed up transportation to the ferry. But even let's say that in a perfect world is happening, you have to increase frequency of buses. How many times have I stood there with my fellow commuters, waited 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes for a bus in the morning, ending up being late to catch the ferry and then late to catch the subway? Like a lot of my colleagues have said, I've been late to work, and it's through no fault of my own. It is just something that Staten Islanders accept, and we shouldn't. We need to increase the frequency of those buses. We need to install protected bike lanes on major roadways. I'd love to see a study of where that would make sense and where it would least impact existing small businesses. We need to improve the MTA app, because frankly, I think it lies a lot just to make its numbers. It doesn't tell us the real arrival times. It's very confusing, and I find third-party apps to actually be more reliable than the MTA app itself. We need to enable our buses to control traffic signals. There is software that allows for that. And I think if the bus driver was able to better time themselves based on our traffic signals, they'd be faster. 2 ideas. 1, if you're going to make me wait for a bus for 45 minutes, for God's sakes, give me a bench to sit on. How many folks have I heard that from in the last few months that I've been walking around talking to people? Give me a bench to sit if I'm going to wait 45 minutes. So we're going to push the MTA to install more benches. And second, and I want to thank one of my friends for giving me this idea, we do not have a late night bus service. Manhattan does, the Bronx does, and Brooklyn does. Why don't we have late night service? We have 5,000 people working at an Amazon distribution plant. We have 2 hospitals with folks working on the overnight shift, and yet we don't have a bus that works the overnight shift too. We need that. We need to treat them with the same dignity and respect that we treat everyone else that works 9 to 5 jobs or 8 to 6 jobs. Folks on the overnight deserve a bus to be able to get home safely and securely.
Mike, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our 4th question. And again, this question is coming from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. The built environment impacts a community's ability to thrive and encompasses safe parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and neighborhood design, in addition to the necessities of affordable housing, access to fresh and healthy foods, and transportation infrastructure. As our City Council member, what is your vision and plan for improving the North Shore's built environment, especially in neighborhoods that have experienced serious disinvestments?
Right. Well, I want to start out, I want to paraphrase President Biden. President Biden said that, and again, I paraphrase, all agencies become environmental agencies. In this world, in this day and age, everything that they do should have an eye on resiliency and sustainability. I've seen it firsthand in my work at New York City Parks. I saw it firsthand in my work with New York Roadrunners. When I worked at Parks, the resiliency and sustainability was second nature to our landscape architects and our developers who did projects on parkland. They would include easily drainable floor tiles that would allow water to drain through. They would enlarge tree pits. They would create shade structures, green roofs, things that made the built environment more sustainable, would do more carbon capture, more heat capture, and create a cooler, safer environment. We did the same thing when I was at New York Roadrunners. We underwrote the Trust for Public Lands program to turn schoolyards into playgrounds. And very often they would partner with the DEP to install stormwater capture, trees for shade, again, canopies for play spaces for children. So in the built environment, we need to make it more friendly to the earth, but we also have to recognize that with climate change, that as the temperatures rise, we need to create more cooling effects for our kids and our seniors. I'd like to do something different when I talk about built environment. I'd like to actually pull some of the capital funding away from our council members. Now that doesn't sound right? Because if I want to be the next council member, why would I surrender some of the ability to give out capital funding? Well, I'll tell you why. Nobody should be holding our parks captive to a political agenda. I wouldn't do that. I'm very pragmatic. I don't really care if you like or you don't like me because I make a decision on a playground that gets funded or not. That's not how I think. But what I will tell you is that a lot of parks get funded based on political agendas. And so I'd like to take some of that money and create a pot of it for the Parks Department to be able to do the things that they need to do to repair parks that are most underserved neighborhoods. I'd like to see three things. I'd like to see when we require more development, new development, that's a whole forum in and of itself. I'd love to see those developers create spaces for grocery stores of all sizes in the bottom floor of those buildings. I'd like to see an expansion of Grow NYC's youth markets for two reasons. One, to bring fresh foods into neighborhoods that don't have it, and also teach our high school kids a little bit about economics and finance. And three, and this is a big one, I'd love to return liability of our sidewalks back to the city. It was done for tort reform back under Mayor Bloomberg. I think it was the wrong move. It costs homeowners and businesses gobs of money to be compliant. Let the city spend the money. Let them take care of our sidewalks. Let them make sure that they're all ADA accessible and that all of our pedestrians can use them and use them safely.
Thank you, Mike. We're at time for this question, and we're going to transition to our fifth and final question from partners. Also, I just want to note a trigger warning for some viewers. We are also going to be putting in the chat NYC Wellness links. In 2020, nearly half of Staten Island's 11 deadly traffic crashes occurred here on the North Shore. Additionally, 41% of Staten Island's 4,128 total traffic crashes happened here on the North Shore. What will you do to stop traffic violence?
Well, I think the very premise of what Transportation Alternatives does is to reduce car traffic, right? So if you reduce car traffic, you reduce traffic, which means you reduce the likelihood of accidents. But there's another thing that we haven't talked about. The reduction in traffic actually increases the health and wellness of our communities. So with less carbon footprints of each vehicle, the healthier our communities will be. You know, that as an aside, I just wanted to mention that I also noticed something else. We never heard from any of the candidates anything about Vision Zero. Why is that? Let me tell you about my experience with Vision Zero. When I worked for New York City Parks, we had sidewalks along parks that were misaligned at intersections. And inevitably you had a mother with a stroller or a senior or a runner who'd get hit or clipped by a car. So we would take that information, we drag DOT to the scene, we talk about realigning those intersections. None of them ever happened. You want to know why? Not because DOT is some evil, horrible agency. They're not. They happen to be well-intentioned public servants who have tremendous obstacles to overcome to get their work done. And why is that? They have to go to Manhattan to get permission to do everything. I'd like to turn local control back to the new borough commissioner at DOT, to the borough commissioners of other agencies, so they don't have to run to Manhattan to get permission to do the things that they know will save lives. I think it's a no-brainer. I also have 4 ideas. One of them actually has to do with speed cameras. Yeah, I think I actually thought I was the only candidate that didn't like speed cameras. The reason why I don't like them is the way the law is drafted is not the way that the de Blasio administration implemented them. If you look at where they're supposed to be within a certain radius of schools, and they're supposed to be aimed towards the schools so that the traffic going towards the school is being monitored. Well, if you look at most of the cameras, they're facing away from the schools, and it means it's punitive. Second, the cameras are supposed to be turned off after school hours. They're always on. So I think we need to rethink speed cameras. That's going to take change in legislation on the state level and a home rule on the city level from the city council. I think we need to mark clearly left turn lanes. How many of us have been in a situation where someone's on the inner part of a left turn lane and they almost clip you? Well, you know what it is? They can't really see where the lane goes. So I think DOT has to come up with a more innovative and visible way to denote the left turn lane. I think we need to reevaluate all the intersections on the North Shore and look for left turn lights. That'll cut down on some of the cross traffic collisions. And I think we have to look at more rights on red for vehicles. I think it does a lot to move traffic along, and it also cuts down on potential traffic collisions. So those are my 4 ideas there.
Mike, thank you so much. We do have one lightning round question, and it's a lighthearted question that's going to help some of us to get to know our candidates a little bit better. Your lightning round question, which you'll have 1 minute to respond to, is what is one nickname you had as a kid that you always hated?
Well, can I give 2 answers? Yeah, well, actually, because my name is everyone's named Michael, right? I was just Schnall. That was what I was called all through, junior high school and high school. I can't really think of sort of the bad ones. I mean, I kind of blocked those out. But yeah, I mean, Schnall was my nickname. It still is my nickname for most of my friends in college. It's not what my family calls me. My mom insists that I'm Michael. I prefer to go with Mike. I think it's a little quicker, easier to remember. But sorry, I don't have a better answer. I really was thinking that you were going to ask me about what my favorite dessert was, my Netflix binge. I have all those answers just in case you want them.
Your minute is up. Feel free to share, Mike.
Okay. Breaking Bad, all-time favorite TV series. My favorite dessert is anything chocolate, so I'm heading over to Selina's house after this. And that's about it. That's all I have for you. It's 8 o'clock.
Wonderful. So it seems like the after party is going to be at Selina's house with chocolate cake and maybe some soul food pizza. So I just want to thank everyone again for joining us tonight for our candidate forum. I'm going to pass it to Rose, who is going to close us out for tonight.
Yes, thank you all again for being here tonight. I'm glad we were able to run on time and actually ahead of time, which is definitely exciting in a forum. I think that it was illuminating to hear from all of our wonderful candidates. And I hope that, all of our audience members found tonight to be a great experience. I just want to let you all know that we will be following up with candidate questionnaires that all candidates will be able to, fill out to share their responses as well. And otherwise, I hope you all have a good night, and we will see you soon.